Hi everyone, welcome to this build where I'm turning a Marshall's headphone box into a miniature record shop. I'd say this is my second custom build. I had so much fun doing it, but I learned a lot of lessons. I was definitely learning as I went with this project. The majority of the things I do in this video was actually for the first time, and I have to say I think it worked out quite well. I really wanted to go for a late 80s, early 90s kind of grunge vibe. I wanted it to feel like it's the kind of shop you walk into and Nirvana's just playing on repeat. So I'm starting off the build with the floor, and I'm just making this out of lollipop sticks. It was my first time actually making a floor this way, and I enjoyed it way more than I thought. I measured out the floor, created a template in the pattern I wanted, cut all the lollipop sticks to size and sanded them down, and then decided to stick them onto a piece of cardboard so I could easily take the floor in and out during the build. This was actually my first time using a hot glue gun as well, and I only burnt myself a few times, quite proud of that. So I'm sticking them down, trying to keep them quite level, but I'm also trying not to be too perfect about it because I really want the shop to feel very kind of grungy and handmade. I remember being quite annoyed at the amount of gaps in this floorboard, so I decided to sand it down and realised that the sawdust actually filled in the gaps really nicely. So now I'm just rubbing some stain onto it. I've stained it in the shade Teak, which I ended up using a lot of. It's turned out to be my favourite shade. And I'm just going back over the most worn areas with more stain so it kind of looks more dirty. And I'm doing it really roughly to give the look of dirt or a very well worn floor. Now this was my favourite part of making the floor. I made a bunch of tiny little stickers of receipts, concert tickets, money, just random things that you would kind of drop out of your pocket, and I just started putting them onto the floor in between the floorboards. And you can see here how much I hate using tweezers because they never work. I just started scratching them up to give them a worn look. I'm scratching up the floorboards right there because I'm going to be adding a door to a recording studio, and I kind of imagined the scratches are from dragging heavy equipment in and out of the room all the time. Going back in with, I think, some black paint and some water to add some more dirt to that area. Moving on to the next part of the build, which is the poster wall and ceiling. I spent hours going through Pinterest, Google, archive websites, and I've tried my absolute hardest to make sure that every poster I found, it was a real poster from that time, and I've tried to avoid any AI or any fan-made posters because I don't want to be stealing someone else's artwork without credit. And I came up with the genius idea of printing out on sticker paper. I was so proud of myself because this just eliminated one step, and I don't know if you're like me, but glue really winds me up in miniature making because it gets too messy. It doesn't dry quick enough for me, and I'm very impatient. So once I found them all, I put them on Photoshop and I downsized them. I'm making this to 1/12 scale, by the way, with a couple of things cheated to be a bit smaller because they wouldn't fit otherwise. So I've just downsized the posters, printed them out, cut them out very carefully, and now I'm just layering them onto the wall and the ceiling. I actually did have a process behind this. I stuck them down in 3 layers to build up texture. So the first layer, which is the base, which means that everything is quite flat and uniform. The second layer was roughing up some posters and sticking them down so it looks like they'd maybe just been hastily shoved up there or picked at, so they're slightly coming off the wall. And then the third layer was just going in and adding some tiny little concert tickets to the wall. So for the third part of the build is the giant speaker wall at the back. Giant tiny speaker wall at the back, shall I say. This was the first idea that I had, was this giant speaker wall. And it was the hardest part of the build. It took me so long to try and figure out how to make the speakers. I know it sounds like it should be simple, but it just really wasn't. I tried so many different things. This is an old piece of wood from a canvas that I'd kept, and it was the perfect size for the speakers, but I couldn't figure out how to make the cones and the surrounds. I tried clay, I tried foil, I tried everything. I was hunting around in my craft stash where I've kept bits of miniatures over the years, and I came across a metal eyelet, and it was a proper light bulb moment, and it worked perfectly for the surrounds. So then I started drilling into the wood with a mini Dremel, and as you can see here, right at the last hurdle it ended up splitting, so I redid it with a thinner piece of MDF, and then I remembered cardboard existed, so I painted a whole bunch of cardboard black and found a hole punch that had the perfect size hole for the metal eyelets. It just felt like everything came together perfectly. And for the frames of the speakers, I'm just using coffee stirrers. One of the reasons why it was so difficult for me to do the speaker wall was because I was trying to figure out ways of making each speaker look different. I ended up using a combination of paint, electric tape, which ended up being an absolute lifesaver for getting that kind of leather shiny look. An old pair of Tites came in handy for when I was making amps. My box of fabric scraps came in very handy for a houndstooth speaker. This is where I have a love-hate relationship for myself because I'm an absolute sucker for detail, but there really didn't need to be this much detail. I googled real authentic speakers from that era, found the exact dimensions and downsized them. Why, I don't know, because no one's going to go in there and measure it, but it felt wrong if I didn't. I was coming up with things that I could add to the speaker walls that wasn't speakers so I could fill in the gaps. And I came up with this quick and easy way of adding some vinyls in. I printed out some blocks of colour onto sticker paper, got offcuts of coffee stirrers from all the frames I've been making, and then made the spine for all these vinyls. Stuck them all together in the shelf, and then when I finished it, I picked it up and turned it round, and I realised I actually preferred the back of it a lot more for some reason. So I compromised and I ended up doing 2 vinyl stacks, one that's front facing and one that's back facing. So the majority of the speakers are built out of cardboard, but I tried to use foam for a couple of them, so some speakers would stick out more than the others. I'm doing the same thing that I did with the half vinyls and doing it with some tiny VHS tapes too. Also, fun fact for you, I went and found some of the most iconic live music performances and I wrote each one of those names on the VHS tape labels, which you can't even see once printed out, but just know that they're there. Now in this wall, I was really obsessed with the idea of having a working TV, and I spent so long figuring out how to do it, and I now know how to do it. I just couldn't justify the cost of buying all of the things. So for now we're going with a cardboard TV frame, and I'm cutting out the middle and sticking some curved plastic on the inside along with a test screen. And then I'm going to wire up a flickering LED bulb behind it, so when it's switched on it looks like it's a TV on standby. So for the back of it, I just got some more of that foam I was using earlier and cut it to size so that there was enough gap between the TV and the back of the box for the light bulb to sit. I'm wiring up the flickering LED bulb and testing out before I put it in, because there's no heartbreak like doing a miniature build and then finding out that the light bulb doesn't work right at the end. Now I'm finally getting to put all the speakers together, and I've sped it up for both mine and your sake because that part alone was over 20 minutes. And then just adding the last speaker, and that is the speaker wall done. Tested my patience a lot, and I was very happy to have it over and done with, but at the end of the day it turned out well, so it was worth it. For the next part, we're moving on to the last wall, which is the cassette tape wall, and that's a temporary door to the recording studio I mentioned earlier. And yet again, another time where I added too much detail and I didn't need to. My mum lent me some of her cassettes. I scanned the tape and the insert because I really thought you'd be able to see all of the details. And you can't. And for some reason I was going to cut out each tiny cassette tape, stick it to plastic and then cut it out again, and then stick the tiny cassette tapes to the wall. And then 3 cassette tapes in, I realised that's absolutely insane. I ended up just doing it in bulk like this and sticking some clear acrylic on top to give the shiny look. I really did want to do them individually, but there's times where you've just got to go for the quick option. To go next to the door, I thought of this second-hand vinyl stand, and I don't know how it got so tall, and I hated the look of it, so I just cut the legs off and it ended up being a floating shelf, but worked quite nicely. On to making the real door. I used the frame from the temporary door and stuck it onto some basswood, stained it teak, and then just painting the frame black. I've also made the handle out of coffee stirrer and basswood, painted it black and sticking it on. Like I mentioned earlier, this is going to be the door to the recording studio, and so I've made a little notice on that says do not enter if the light is turned on. Scrunching up and then lightly sticking it back down so the corners are still lifted but it's stuck on there nice and secure. And then I went back to the sticker sheets that I printed out earlier and used the stickers that I hadn't put on the wall to cover the door. This ended up being one of my favourite parts, weirdly. I don't know why, but I just really like how the door turned out. Obviously I added a light bulb to the TV and a speaker wall, and I needed a place for the switch to sit. So I decided to make up a cardboard box out of some scrap cardboard that I had to fit under the vinyl shelf. So I stuck the switch in the bottom, cut out a little hole as if like a mouse had nibbled on the box so I could turn the switch on and off, and then drilled a hole into the side of the box so the wires could feed through. I knew I wanted to fill it with something, but I wasn't sure yet, so I just made these newspapers and scrunched them up and put them in there for now to cover up the switch. And obviously the shelf needed some second-hand vinyls, so I just picked The Who, Green Day, The Beatles and Joan Jett, cut the album artwork out and stuck it onto some cardboard, aged them up and put them in the shelf, and then I'm just adding some stickers to it. Now for the vinyl stand. What you're seeing here is a vinyl stand made out of basswood, and I was so proud of it. It was one of the cleanest, easiest, best built things I'd ever made. And I finished building it, Went to put it in the shop and I realised it, for some reason, it was half the size of the shop. I don't know what went wrong with my measurements, but I thought it's worth including the mistake, because then I had to remake it 2 more times. You can see here, this was the second attempt and I was really liking how it was going. But then I realised the vinyls didn't fit in it nicely. So I tried sawing it while it was still together. Didn't work. So then I just ripped it apart and stuck it back together. Thank God I'm covering this thing in stickers because it looks truly awful underneath. I decided that the vinyls that would be on display were going to be the owner's favourites, the owner's being me. And so any vinyls that you see on this section are actually some of my favourite albums. Again, I'm choosing some stickers that I didn't use in the other part of the build and layering it onto the stand. Now, these vinyls. This is where I really outdid myself, because only maybe 4 or 5 vinyls are going to be on display at the time. I decided to make 100 realistic vinyls, which meant I had to cut out 200 covers. And I thought, that's not bad, I've got a guillotine. Wrong, it broke on the first cut. As you can see by my disappointed finger tapping, it was then I realised I was going to have to cut these out by hand. And I'm hypermobile and my hands hurt enough as it is just existing, so I had to recover for like 3 days after this. I look like Chandler from Friends when he got the claw. But thanks to the magic of editing, you don't have to sit through all of that, and so now you can watch me stick them onto the cardboard. And yes, I realise now that I could have stuck the whole sticker sheet onto the cardboard and then cut it out. But here we are, apparently I like to torture myself, and we've got a very cute Carole King vinyl. So I just did that, times 100, or 200, and now I get the pleasure of just simply filling up the vinyl record stand. Before you say anything, because a couple of people have on Instagram, I know vinyl shouldn't be stacked in piles. I had another idea for the bottom part of it, but again, for some reason the vinyls weren't fitting the way they were meant to, and so I stacked them up, and we're just going to have to deal with it. It's okay, there's no vinyls actually in there, it's all just a miniature model. But I am aware they shouldn't be stored like that. Do not store your records like that. And into the record shop she goes. And what's a record shop without a record player? So I was originally going to have the vinyl player in the speaker wall, but it didn't work out. So I came up with the idea to hole punch God knows how many tiny discs out of acrylic, you can see there. But I had this idea to make a table out of vinyl discs. And so I'm sticking them together using double-sided tape here. I'm more disappointed finger tapping as I knocked over the pile. One thing you'll have to learn if you subscribe to this channel is that I'm extremely clumsy and I basically break everything. But I lined them so they were all a bit wonky, so you could tell that they were vinyl discs. So I feel like if it was just one perfect block, you wouldn't be able to tell. And I just painted it black with acrylic paint and moved on to the record player. Fun fact, this is my least favourite part of the build. I remember being really tired at this point and it just wasn't going right, so I really just I really just shoved this piece together and I didn't like how it turned out. I think it's the least realistic piece out of the whole shop, but it is what it is. So I just used foam, coffee stirrers and cardboard, and used a silver metallic paint pen that I had to create all the pieces. Used the acetate to create the little vinyl disc. And for the tone arm and stylus, I just used some of this thick black wire that I had lying around. And as I did with every other part of this build, I just covered the mistakes in stickers. I didn't get great footage of this. I do apologise that the majority of this video is the back of my hand. I'm still trying to figure out my angles because I film for YouTube and social at the same time. And now we're moving on to the CD stand, which I had like 3 or 4 versions of before I decided on this one, so I didn't film too much of this because at this point I just wanted it to be done. But again, I used basswood and coffee stirrers to create a cabinet. And then I tried multiple different things to use as hinges for the cupboard doors before I just landed on using double-sided tape. It was so much easier and I knew it was going to be covered up by stickers anyway, so I wasn't too fussed about how it looked. So you remember a few minutes ago when I was slating myself for doing that many vinyls when it wasn't necessary to be that detailed in the first place. I did it all again for the CDs. I was a bit easier on myself, I only did 85 CDs, but again I printed them out and I stuck acetate on top and then stuck the front and the back pieces together so it looked like it was in the CD case. These did annoy me though, because it was only after I did them all that I realised that they felt bigger than they were meant to. They kind of looked like mini vinyls instead of CDs, but again, at this point I'd been cutting for hours, and so we're just going to go with the flow. We're just going to go with the flow and have huge CDs. This piece is only for myself, it's not a commission or anything, so I don't mind making mistakes like these. Any extra CDs I had that didn't fit in the stand then went into the little box that I made earlier to hide the switch, and I just wrote used CDs on there. So for the final part, this was actually the first thing I made for the shop, but it felt a bit out of order when I was editing the video, so I put it last. But this is the recording studio light box that's going to sit above the recording studio door. And the plan was to draw a hole in the side of the box, feed the wires through, connect them with the TV wires, and then connect them with the hidden switch wire. Again, using my favourite material, coffee stirrers, sticking them together using craft glue, and painting them black with acrylic paint. So much of this build was just the same process over and over again. I made the signs myself on Photoshop, downsized and printed them out, and then stuck some clear acrylic over the top to give it a shiny look. Now I'm putting the LED into the box and completing the other side. And now I'm going to put everything together. This is my favourite part of the build because this is just where you see everything come to life. To me, I'm never ever ever happy with my project until it's done. I don't know why, I spend the whole time building it hating what I'm doing, and then as soon as it's finished I'm like, oh, that's great, I had so much fun, let me do that all again. But I feel like that's a very normal creative process. If anyone's got any tips on how to hide wires, please let me know, because the back of this box is ugly. It is wire central. And now for the moment of truth. Does it switch on? It does. I was so happy that it all lit up because that wiring took so much longer than I expected. And here is the final build. It turned out so much better than I thought it would. This was exactly how I pictured it in my head. I'd just like to apologise again for all the camera angles at the back of my hand. This is only my second video, so I'm learning as I go. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more miniature builds. Thanks for watching.